Let's take a look at SolidFire's support for KVM in CloudStack. I've logged into the CloudStack GUI as an administrator, and I'm on the Infrastructure tab. Just to give you a high-level view of my environment, I have a single zone, single pod, 3 clusters, one of which is a KVM cluster, and then I also have a VMware cluster and a Xen server cluster. I've got 2 hosts in each cluster, so 6 hosts total. A bunch of primary storages, 1 secondary storage, and a few system VMs. Let's go into the primary storage area and take a look at the primary storage that is third from the top in the table. This is the primary storage that we'll use primarily in this video. I'll click on this name, and we can see this primary storage as primary storages in general in CloudStack. This one has a name, an ID, a state. It has a storage tag. Now, in general, you can provide 0, 1, or more storage tags for your primary storages. It's in a zone, and the unique part of this is that it's not associated with a pod or a cluster. So this is considered zone-wide primary storage, as opposed to cluster-wide primary storage or local primary storage. We can see the type is iSCSI, and if I scroll down to the bottom, we can see I've given CloudStack permission to use 2 petabytes from the underlying SAN that this primary storage represents, and up to 4.5 million IOPS. So unlike a traditional primary storage, which is based on a pre-created volume, in this case, this primary storage is based on a subset of my underlying SAN. And I've given CloudStack permission to use a certain amount of capacity and performance when creating volumes. So CloudStack can use this primary storage to create volumes on the underlying SAN until it hits the size and/or the performance limits. Now let's go ahead and create a disk offering to make use of this primary storage. And we can see if I scroll up to the top here, the storage tag that I have for this particular primary storage is SolidFire SAN 1, and none of my other primary storages has this particular storage tag. I'll switch over to the Service Offerings tab, and in the Select Offering combo box, I'll drop that down and go over to Disk Offerings. In the upper right, I'll click on Add Disk Offering. Now I'll provide a name, let's say SolidFire Disk Offering 4, and something similar for the description, but I'm also going to provide information about the performance. So in this case, let's go with a minimum number of IOPS at 5,000 and a maximum at 8,000. The storage type is shared. We can go down to the disk size, and let's put a number in like 100 gigabytes. If we wanted, as an administrator, to pass this option on to our end user, we could check the custom disk size checkbox, and then the end user can fill in the size. But in this example, I'm going to leave this in the default state, which is unchecked, and I entered in 100 gigabytes for the size of the volume. Now for QoS Type, quality of service type, I'm going to drop this combo box down and select the storage option. This will put a few extra fields below the QoS Type field. I'm going to scroll down a bit here. Let's fill in for the min IOPS what we said in the description, 5,000, and we'll put in 8,000 for the max. And again, in a similar fashion to the disk size, if we wanted to pass these 2 options on to the end user as an administrator, we could check the custom IOPS checkbox and allow the end user to fill in those fields. But I'm going to leave this in the unchecked state, the default state, and keep my 5,000 and 8,000 numbers in the fields. Now, the next step is to go ahead and put a storage tags value in. so that we find the primary storage that we want to support this particular disk offering. I'm going to type in an S. A search has been performed. It's found some corresponding tags, and the one I want is the SolidFire SAN1 tag, which is already selected, so I'm just going to hit the Enter button. And now that's filled in. We've got all of our information filled in, and I'll just go ahead and hit the OK button to create this disk offering. Okay, great. Our disk offering has been created. Now that we have our newly created disk offering, let's switch over to the Storage tab and make use of it by creating a volume that makes use of that disk offering. In the upper right, I'll hit the Add button and fill in a name. Vol-A sounds good. I only have one availability zone, but if you did have multiple availability zones, we'd want to make sure that we create this volume in the zone that contains the VM that we'd like to attach this volume to. So since I only have one zone and it's already been selected, we can move on to the next field. For disk offering, I'll go ahead and click on the combo box, and we can see here our catalog of disk offerings. I'll go ahead and select the one that we just created, and now we're ready to go ahead and hit the OK button. This will place information in CloudStack's cloud database. Now we're ready to go ahead and attach this volume to a VM. I'll switch over to the Quick View column, click on the Attach Disk button. I only have one VM in this entire cloud environment, and it's already been selected, so I'll just go ahead and hit the OK button. Now right now, CloudStack is running through its storage orchestration logic. It knows what disk offering is associated with this particular volume. It knows the storage tag of that particular disk offering. It will go through the primary storages, try to find primary storage that can satisfy that storage tag, and primary storage that meets other criteria such as the same zone. Once it's found it, it knows about the underlying storage plugin that supports that primary storage, which in this case is the SolidFire storage plugin. CloudStack will begin initiating commands on the SolidFire storage plugin, and that plugin will go off to the SolidFire SAN and create the appropriate volume. Now let's switch over to the SolidFire GUI, and we can see a little bit more what's happened on the back end. This is the Accounts tab, and we're actually looking at data from a little while ago, so I'll go ahead and click the Refresh button. What we will see is, and I'll highlight the name, this particular SolidFire account is associated with a CloudStack account. The CloudStack account, in fact, that we initiated this attach volume request from. If we did not have a previously existing SolidFire account mapped to that CloudStack account, we would have first created that. The plugin would have created that automatically, and then the plugin would create the volume and place it in that particular account. In this case, I have already used this particular CloudStack account with this particular SolidFire cluster, so I did have a SolidFire account already mapped to that CloudStack account. What we will see here when I hit refresh is that I used to have just a single active volume associated with this SolidFire account, and now we'll see there's two. I hit the refresh button, and here we are. There's two volumes now associated with this SolidFire account. I'll click on the hyperlink for two. This will take us over to the Active Volumes tab. And we can see here, now this first volume was developed a while ago for some other work that I was engaged in. This second volume was the one that was just created a moment ago when we attached that CloudStack volume to the virtual machine for the first time. At that point, that's when the SolidFire plugin was notified to go off to the SAN, create this volume with a particular size, in this case 100 gigabytes, which I've highlighted, and a particular quality of service. I'll switch over to that tab now, and we can see here, as we saw from the disk offering, 5,000 minimum IOPS and 8,000 maximum IOPS. The burst IOPS is calculated by taking the max IOPS and multiplying it by a number that we provided to CloudStack when we added that primary storage originally. In this case, that number was 1.5. So 8,000 times 1.5, we have 12,000 burst IOPS. Now, if we switch back over to the Volume Overview tab, we can see, and I'll go ahead and highlight it, this particular volume is in the highlighted volume access group. A volume access group is like an access control list. It contains a list of the iSCSI qualified names of each of our hypervisor hosts. So in this case, there would be 2 of those because I have 2 KVM hosts in my KVM cluster. And it would have the list of all of the SolidFire volumes that those hosts can access. In this case, there should only be 1. So if we go over to the Volume Access Groups tab, and we'll look at the Volume Access Group ending in 4A2. So here we are, 4A2, I'll highlight that name. It does in fact have a single active volume, and if we look at the initiators, these are our 2 hypervisor host IQNs, the iSCSI qualified names. So those 2 KVM hosts do have access to the volume that we just created a moment ago. Let's go back to CloudStack now and see how this looks from CloudStack's point of view. We're back on the Storage tab. I'll go ahead and click the volume-A name in the table. Now we can see some of the details, including the fact that this volume is associated with SolidFire Disk Offering 4. If we scroll down lower, we can see the hypervisor type is KVM. The size of the volume is 100 gigabytes. We have 5,000 minimum IOPS and 8,000 maximum IOPS. So that all looks great. Let's go over to the Instances tab now. And in the Quick View column, I'll go ahead and locate the View Console button and click on that. Okay, now we're able to log into our VM. I'm going to clear this out and run fdisk-l. And here we can see our first device is our root disk at 40 gigabytes. Our second device is our data disk at 100 gigabytes, which is what we would have expected from the disk offering. So this all looks great. Now let's say we've been using this data disk for a while and we decide we need more performance to it. It's easy enough to do. Let's go back to CloudStack's main GUI. In the Storage tab, I'll go ahead in the Quick View column and I'll click on the Resize Volume button. Now here we can take a look again at our catalog of disk offerings. Now I know I'm at this one, 5,000 minimum, 8,000 maximum. Let's say we want to go to 7,000 minimum, 10,000 maximum. I'll go ahead and select this disk offering and then just hit the OK button. Now CloudStack will let the SolidFire Storage plugin know about this, and the SolidFire Storage plugin in turn will talk to the underlying storage area network and make the appropriate changes. So the volume has been resized. If I go and click on Vol-A within the table and scroll down, we can see, and I'll highlight it here, SolidFire Disk Offering 2. We should expect from the description 100 gigabytes, which is the same as what we had, 7,000 minimum IOPS and 10,000 maximum. As we scroll down, we can see the size at 100 gigabytes still. We now have 7,000 minimum IOPS and 10,000 maximum IOPS. Great. Let's go and confirm that on the SolidFire system by switching over to the GUI for SolidFire. And over in the Active Volumes tab, we'll switch over to the sub-tab Quality of Service. And we can see here, I'll highlight it, 7,000 and 10,000. So this looks great. We've been able to dynamically change our quality of service settings for our volume. This did not require any downtime. And we can just as easily go in the reverse direction if we decide, for example, that we're paying for a disk offering that's delivering more performance than we need, and we want to downgrade that to something that perhaps costs less and delivers less performance. So you can go both increase and decrease dynamically very easily. Let's now switch over to CloudStack again on the Storage tab and add another volume which will attach to the same VM. In the upper right, I'll click Add. Let's put a name in like vol-b. It's already selected our one and only availability zone. In the disk offerings combo box, I'll go ahead and take a look at my catalog. I'm going to pick SolidFire disk offering 3, so 100 gigabytes, just like our first volume that we attached to this VM, but different performance characteristics. In this case, 5,000 and 7,000 IOPS. I'll hit the OK button. In a moment, this will be added to our database. There we are. In the Quick View column, I'm going to go and click on the Attach Disk button. It's selected the one and only VM in our environment, so all I have to do now is hit OK. All right, so let's switch over to SolidFire's GUI, and I'll hit the refresh button, and in a moment we should see a new volume, there it is, added to the SolidFire cluster. It has the expected 5,000 minimum IOPS and 7,000 maximum IOPS. And then if you take the 7,000 times 1.5, we arrive at 10,500 burst IOPS. If we switch over to the Volume Overview tab, we can see that the size of this volume is actually the same as the size of the previously created volume, which is what we did expect. In this particular moment, it looks like we've caught the system before it added this volume to the appropriate volume access group, so we see the volume access group's cell is empty. If I hit the refresh button, we'll see that vol-b should be added to the same volume access group as vol-a. I'll hit refresh now. And there we are. They're in the same volume access group, indicating that those two KVM hosts in our KVM cluster have access to both vol-a and vol-b. Now we'll switch back over to CloudStack. In the notifications area, we can see that we have attached the disk successfully. Now we can go over to our console view of our VM. I'm going to clear and run fdisk-l, and we should see 3 devices. Here we are. Our first device is our root disk. Our second device is our first data disk, and our third device is our second data disk. And as we would expect, since we picked disk offerings that had the same size, both of our data disks have the same size. But it's very important to note that these 2 data disks actually have differing performance characteristics on the SolidFire system. And as we saw earlier, we can change those performance characteristics as we need to through changing disk offerings or other means. So it's a very fine-grained performance isolation system that allows us to have differing performance characteristics per device. That concludes what I had planned on demonstrating in this particular video for SolidFire's support for KVM in CloudStack. Thanks for watching.